All right, let's dive right in. We're going to unpack how a messy, chaotic ball game somehow became the entire planet's greatest passion. This is the incredible story of football.
To understand just how big this whole thing is, you really only need one number, 4 billion. That's how many fans the game has today. You heard that right. That's about half the people on Earth. It's more than a sport, it's pretty much a global language. So the big question is, how on earth did that happen? How did this simple game completely conquer the world? Well, to get that answer, we need to go back. Way, way back.
Our story doesn't start in some fancy stadium. Nope. It begins with ancient rituals and tough military drills, where the very first seeds of football were being planted all across the ancient world.
Different versions of kicking a ball around just kept popping up everywhere. The Maya and Aztecs played some seriously brutal ritual games. The Greeks and Romans had their own violent versions for military training. But the one that looks most like the modern game, that was probably chuju in ancient China, a military exercise where soldiers kicked a leather ball into a small net.
Now, let's fast forward to medieval England, where we find something called mob football. Honestly, it was less of a sport and more like a full-on town riot. Entire villages would go at it, trying to drag an inflated pig's bladder to the other town center. There's basically only one rule: try not to actually murder anyone.
This glorious mess got so out of hand that King Edward II actually banned it in 1314. He complained about the great noise in the city and said anyone caught playing would be thrown in prison. But here's the thing about passion. You can't just make it illegal. The game just refused to die.
So, for the game to really grow up, it had to be tamed. This next part of the story is all about that huge moment when order was finally brought to the chaos, and the sport we know today was actually born.
The first big step came from Cambridge University in 1848. See, students from different schools all had their own weird rules, so they finally sat down to agree on one single code. Legend has it they wrote them down and nailed them to a tree for everyone to see. And these rules introduced things we totally take for granted now, like throw-ins and goal kicks.
But 1863? Oh man, that was the year. That's when the game really found its soul. In a London pub, guys from a dozen different clubs made 3 massive decisions. 1, they formed the Football Association, or the FA. 2, they banned hacking, which was just kicking your opponents in the shins. Ouch. And 3, this was the big one. They banned carrying the ball. And right there, in that moment, football and rugby went their separate ways forever.
And fun fact, this is exactly where the word soccer comes from. It was just college slang. Students took the "assoc" from association football, tacked on their favorite ending, and boom, soccer was born. It's literally a nickname from the group that created the modern game.
Okay, so you have rules, now you need something to play for. In 1871, the FA Cup was born. It's still going today, the oldest competition in the world. A year later, we got the first ever official international match, Scotland versus England. 4,000 fans gathered to watch a 0-0 draw. Yep, a scoreless tie. Not exactly a blockbuster beginning, but hey, it was a start.
England may have written the first rule book, but the real story of football is how the rest of the world grabbed that book, ripped out a few pages, and started writing their own amazing new chapters. After that, the growth was just explosive. In 1885, they finally made it legal to pay players. Just 3 years later, the world's first pro league was founded. By 1904, the game was so big it needed a global governing body, so FIFA was formed in Paris. All of this was building towards one ultimate dream: a real world championship. And in 1930, it finally happened. The very first World Cup, hosted in Uruguay.
But the game's power goes so far beyond just winning trophies. During the darkest days of World War I, on Christmas Day in 1914, something unbelievable happened. British and German soldiers just stopped fighting. They called a truce, climbed out of their trenches into no man's land, and for a little while, they played a game of football. It might be the single greatest example of the game's power to remind us of our shared humanity, even when things couldn't be more inhumane.
And that shared humanity, that passion, it came roaring back after the wars. Let's jump ahead to the 1950 World Cup in Brazil. The official attendance for the final match was 199,854 people. Can you even imagine that? It's still the biggest crowd for a sports event ever.
So you have nearly 200,000 fans packed into this stadium, ready for a party. All their team, Brazil, needed was a tie against tiny little Uruguay to become world champions. But the script got completely shredded. Uruguay won 2-1. The stadium fell silent, and the entire country went into mourning. The shock was so massive it earned its own name, the Marcanizazo, the Marcanó blow.
But out of that national tragedy, the sport was about to be reborn as a global spectacle. This is the era when television, big money, and larger-than-life icons would transform football into the entertainment beast we know today.
The real turning point was the 1970 World Cup in Mexico. For the very first time, the entire world was watching in beautiful, vibrant color. It was the first time refs used yellow and red cards. It was just the perfect stage for Brazil to finally heal from 1950, led by the sport's first truly global superstar, Pelé, as his incredible team danced their way to a third World Cup title. Now, if Pelé was the perfect hero, the 1986 tournament belonged to the perfect anti-hero, Diego Maradona. In one single game against England, he showed you everything the sport is about. First, he was the villain, cheating with his infamous Hand of God goal. Then, just 4 minutes later, he was the undisputed genius, scoring the goal of the century. Flawed, but absolutely magnificent.
Then the 90s arrived, and it was all about the money. In 1992, the English Premier League was formed, leading to these huge TV deals that just flooded the game with cash. Then, in 1995, a court case called the Bosman ruling gave players free agency. This completely changed everything, shifting power from the clubs to the players and leading to the astronomical salaries we see today.
All that money set the stage for the 21st century game, an era defined by unbelievable drama, controversial new technology, and of course, that endless passionate argument over who is truly the greatest of all time.
And the drama has been just off the charts. Remember the 2006 final? The legendary Zinedine Zidane, one of the most graceful players ever, ends his career with a shocking headbutt. Then you fast forward to 2022, and we get to see Lionel Messi finally win the one trophy he'd always been missing, in what might just be the greatest final ever played.
And alongside all that drama came technology. The game got faster, the stakes got higher, and the human eye just couldn't keep up. In 2014, goal line technology ended all those arguments about whether the ball crossed the line. Then, in 2018, came the video assistant referee, or VAR. It gives us perfect accuracy, but it's also sparked this huge debate. In our search for perfection, are we accidentally killing the raw, spontaneous emotion that made us all fall in love with the game in the first place?
So, from a chaotic mob kicking a pig's bladder across a field to a high-tech, multi-billion-dollar global spectacle, the journey of football has been absolutely extraordinary. It's survived kings, it's stopped wars, and it's given us moments of pure genius and heartbreak. So I'll leave you with one final question to think about. What is the single greatest football moment you have ever witnessed?